Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of TCC, episode 5. Today, we're talking about democracy and everything around it, led by Sumit, and we have a special guest, Yash Raj Singh, who's currently a law student at the Law Faculty, Delhi University. He's also completed his engineering and is an avid reader. He is very interested in subjects like politics, history, and law. So today we have him and Sumit who are going to completely delve into conversation around democracy.
Thanks for being here, Yash. It's so great to finally be able to do this. Without any further ado, I'll begin with what my premise of this was, that I'd been thinking about how democracy has evolved, how democracy is sort of not functioning in the best possible way around the world. We're seeing that erode over the years. We've seen it erode over the years. So at first, I'll get into the basic Athenian ideology of democracy, which the Greek had come up with in the in the 5th century BC, was that all men, all citizens, all men had equal political rights and freedom of speech and opportunity to participate in the political arena. This was the basic ideology of democracy, that everybody should be equal on an equal footing. And it was derived from the Greek words demos, which was all citizens, and kratos, which was meaning the rule. So I think using this as a starting point, do you think this is how democracy is currently right now? What do you think is, and then we'll get into the further details of how it came out to be.
Problem with a lot of these ideas and ideologies is they don't really work on the ground. Most of them are contained in books, and that's where they stay. The first
Right.
formal parliament was called by Simon de Montfort. He was a English baron. The first parliament was held in 1264 in London. There was a parliament, but it was not formal. It was prior to the 1264 parliament. It was held in 1258 at Oxford. Now, the Simon de Montfort eventually became one of the most powerful barons in England because he was basically protesting against a despotic ruler, Henry III. He held the parliament, he led the parliament, he led major reforms. That is how we see the parliamentary democracy functioning right now. It has roots in that democracy. And he was killed in 1265. The next year, to the parliament that he formed. So evolution of democracy is something that it comes with humans, right?
Right.
See, governments have traveled a long distance from republics. India had a very strong system of village republics. The Chola Empire established it. North Indian empires lacked a certain vision of democratization, but South Indian empires had that. The Greeks had some elements of republic. North India, we could say there were some empires towards the east, empires aligned towards Magadh. They had a system of village republic, but it was eventually cancelled out when Magadh took over.
Right.
So that is democracy is something. It's something that we all want. We all want it to function, but it just does not function as the way we want it to function.
Correct. Which is what brings me to, this is what this was sort of like a pessimistic view about democracy that I was reading, and it was basically except from what Socrates said, the philosopher, the great philosopher, that voting in a democratic system is a skill, and not everybody should be considered equal when considering citizenry for being eligible to vote. And then he sort of went into about how intellectual democracy is much more efficient. And when I said intellectual democracy, it means that not just a few people selected by the virtue of some characteristics, but those who are educated and those who have enough thinking capabilities and mental faculties to make those sort of decisions about selecting their leader who's best for their country, who think in terms of issues, and who are able to make that distinction between the right and the wrong. He said intellectual democracy is much more fruitful than just democracy attained by birth, which is essentially the situation right now, that if you're born in a democratic country, you're automatically, when you attain adulthood, you have the right to vote. So this idea really intrigued me because I sort of agree with the idea that not everybody has the same way of rationalization as to who is the best person for the country or what is the best form of governance for the country. So, what do you think is your opinion in terms of intellectual democracy versus democracy by birth? What we see today.
Intellectual democracy is it's a selective democracy. How do you set parameters for who is going to vote and who is not going to vote? That is what the English did to us. That is what Americans did to Americans. Uh, the first voting rights that USA gave to its citizens were restricted to people who owned properties worth at least $250. They raised
Oh,
the
wow.
bar. Yeah, that's how it started. In that
Okay.
sense, India is very fortunate to have given universal franchise right from the first day. It was a humongous
Right.
effort. Sukumar Sen was the first chief election commissioner, and he was a trained mathematician from Oxford, and it was a humongous effort that India took. It was one of the biggest gambles in human history,
Right.
but we did it, right? America could not. They introduced democracy gradually. They introduced it for the white male, the white rich male. Then they
Hmm.
introduced for the white male, irrespective of the wealth. Then they introduced it for the blacks, and then they introduced it for the women. The
Correct.
women came last of the order. How can you call it a representative government if it's not representing almost 80% of the population? That is
True. So
what's
I think what I agree with that, right? So this is what confounds me that how do you strike that balance between a government that is truly representative of the diversity in your populace, but also a voting population that is able to make sound decisions. How do you ensure that in a country? And is that only a function of the education system of the country, or the wealth of the nation, or another cultural form of conditioning, or how do you reconcile those factors when they come into play?
for somebody who has no right. You can make a small start by giving him a voting right. You can strengthen the election commission. You can strengthen the norms and rules for people filling forms for those elections, for campaigning, and for people
Hmm.
who are trying to get elected. You can set a bar for those people. You can set a bar that only graduates can be, graduates can fight elections, or
Right.
postgraduates can. That is a bar. It's an example. But you cannot, now that we have given universal franchise, you just cannot take it back. People will they will be, nobody will give it away. Ambani has one vote, and the poorest man in the poorest district of India has one vote. That
Correct.
that being said, democracy is best run by people who are soft-hearted, not soft-headed.
But and I will preface this by saying that by no means am I against the idea of democracy. I'm just trying to sort of play the devil's advocate and see that to what extent, how foolproof is our system of democracy that we consider to be, as a unambiguous good for the world. Automatically it's considered as the best way of governance, as the best way of living. And just to sort of play with that, I read this sort of like a riddle, which said that if there is a doctor who is running for elections, and a doctor is somebody who might cause you pain just to fix you, to help you get better. And there is a man who's an owner of a sweet shop, right? Who gives everybody sweets and candies and that sort of a thing. And the doctor says that I only hurt you so that you can be better. But the sweet shop owner says that I serve you feast in good times and bad times. And why wouldn't you want that for the rest of your lives? And given the kind of nature, given the way people get attracted to to the carrots of the carrot and stick approach, do you think there's a likelihood that pandering to the governments becomes a way out of democracy and actually like playing the system in a way that that plays to your own personal gains? So I want to hear what how you sort of play around with this idea of choosing what's right for you, or choosing what feels good sort of in the short term?
See, there are four parameters that I personally use for any government, for any democracy. If it's democracy, autocracy, theocracy, I don't care. It's just these four parameters that need to be fulfilled for, in my opinion, for a good government to function. These are freedom of speech and expression,
Mm.
freedom to work, freedom from want. Now, this want can be a lot of things. It can be materialistic. People need freedom from poverty. If I'm
Right.
poor, I need to escape poverty. And freedom from fear. Now, this fear can come from the state. People fear the state. This
Mm.
fear can come from common people, like a group of people scared of another group of people, or a nation scared of another nation. So these are the four fundamental freedoms that a democracy must uh, look into and constitute its constitution around.
Mm.
Unfortunately, India and Indian experience, our historical experience is very different from other countries. We are a poor country to begin with. We are a third world country. Let's be very realistic about it. A lot of people are starving. A lot of people die from starvation. That's half of our kids are malnourished, malnutrition. No
Mm.
government has focused on poverty with a view to eradicate it. They have used it as slogans, as Garibi Hatao, but they have deified poverty. They have spiritualized the whole concept. There should be a Chinese wall between the government and the church. Right?
No,
India
can you
does
explain that? Can you explain that for, in like simpler terms when you say wall between the government and church? Yeah, religion. And also, can you break down which all definitions need redefining? Because so that it becomes easier to go ahead.
Yeah. A lot of people consider the constitution to be a holy book. A lot of people find constitutionalism to be a religion. It's not a religion. Constitution is a book. It's a book which can be discarded as a common book
Right.
once the parliament needs to discard it. Thomas Jefferson was a votary of changing constitutions every 20 years because he was of the view that every generation must be allowed to formulate policies for that generation alone. Lincoln pressed for a government of the people, for the people, by the people. I don't know what the sequence was.
So do you think that's a flaw in how we're taught about seeing, we're taught to see all of these things as holy and untouchable? Is that because of that, or and which is why I'm saying, should education be made in a way where every child grows up thinking that they can question the rule of today to make it better for tomorrow? Because that currently doesn't happen. It's very hard. I wouldn't want to get into the legal aspect because by no means am I an expert, but changing something in the constitution is next to impossible. So do you think that somewhere the flexibility of rule of law should exist, or the rigidity is absolutely necessary?
No, he was talking about rigidity of constitutions. Constitutions are not rigid at all. They are organic documents that evolve with the society. They evolve according to needs of the society. And our constitution cannot be called rigid. There have been 100 plus amendments. We have even dared to amend the preamble. That is where we inserted the two words, secularism and socialism, two new words. Now, the problem with socialism is how do you define a country's economic system? How do you fix it? Because a country evolves, it may choose the type of economy it wants to live with,
Right.
right? It's when the government starts dictating that we need to be a socialist economy, and without even defining the word socialism,
Hmm.
or without defining the word religion in Article 25, you call it religion, but you don't define religion. You leave definition of religions to courts. The Supreme Court decides what Hinduism constitutes, what is the basic essence of Hinduism, what is the basic essence of Islam. Is the Supreme Court the presiding deity of the government that it is supposed to translate religious scriptures for dharma and all that? No, right?
Hmm.
This is not secularism. Either
Correct.
they should either they should stay out of it, or they
Yeah.
should call. If they want to enter into this arena, they can do that. Right? They cannot claim secularism after. There are proper case laws, case materials where Supreme Court judges are going on and on about Upanishads and Dharms. Is this what we are coming to? Do we need to go to Supreme Court judge? Do we need to go to the government to understand
And
what dharma is?
exactly, and then it leaves it open to interpretation of that particular person, which is very dangerous in itself. So Yash, I mean, all of that has been so insightful to hear, and and there were so many things that I didn't know. For instance, the amendment, the numerous amendments that have been made successfully in the constitution. Even though we consider it as untouchable, and it should be followed as it is and things like that. So that's really encouraging to know that citizens have that sort of access to freedom of political expression. But I think what I've gained also is that democracy, it might not be in its current form the best way for everybody and for every institution, for every form of government to follow. But it can be infused in an important way in the fabric of a country to be more just, if I'm not wrong. And that call should be taken by the cultural and the leaders of that particular state or nation in whatever best capacity that is possible in that place. And also that democracy is only as strong as the educational systems that are around it to support it. This has been a great, insightful interaction with you, Yash. And I think all of us will take away that democracy is right now our best bet. It is the best system we have right now. It might get better as people get better, and let's hope they do get better. Cultures get better, and economies get better, and and as a world become a more inclusive sort of a place. But that holds to be, that remains to be seen. And yeah, I think this was very useful for all of us. And
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much, the both of you. For someone like me who's self-proclaimed apolitical, I did pick up a few points from this discussion. And thank you, Yash, for joining us today. It was a great amalgamation of your law of stories, including, some of your sense about politics, and also bringing it all down to if democracy, leaving it to the audience if they feel that's the best bet today or not. And if not, we will in the future come up with podcasts which sort of have that area that to touch upon. And we're hoping to start a series soon. So Sumit and I are working on that. So please keep tuning to our channel, like, share, and subscribe. We will drop our email in the description box below if you want to suggest us any further topics. And thank you so much. Please keep safe, and we'll see you in the next episode.